So I think what this really boils down to is, for those of you who may disagree on the abortion issue and who believe that poor women ought to have the same kind of access, there are alternatives other than going to government and forcing those people who would prefer not to participate in these kinds of things to do it. But nobody should co-opt the government to get the taxpayer to fund these kinds of decisions.
Madam President and members, I wish to challenge Senator Thompson's premise that we ought to pass this bill because some people don't wish to have their tax dollars go toward these services. Well, I personally would not like to see my taxpayer dollars go to pay for an education tuition tax credit for Catholic school students. I don't think it's appropriate. I have a moral and religious objection to paying for other parents who want to send their kids to a private religious school to get religious education, but that seems to be something that passed the Senate earlier this year to allow that to happen. Do I have the right to opt out where my taxpayer dollars go in that regard? If it becomes law, I don't get to opt out. I personally would not like to have my tax dollars go to pay for the interest deductions on the mortgages for someone's second home. I just don't think that's appropriate. First home, okay, let's talk about that policy. But a second home, if someone can afford a second home, they can afford to pay the interest on their mortgage without the taxpayers subsidizing that purchase. I personally object to that, but I don't have a right to opt out. I personally would not have wanted my taxpayer dollars to go to pay for the war in Iraq, not to mention the thousands of American lives that it cost. I had a problem with it. I don't get to opt out. I don't get to send in on April 15th a note saying, you can use my taxpayer dollars for X, Y, and Z, but don't go to pay for our war in Iraq. So we don't get a choice as taxpayers to make those kind of decisions. So just because some of us have problems with where our taxpayers go, the place to solve that, to deal with that, is in the legislative process, yes, but that kind of an argument that some people simply don't want their tax dollars to go there is a non-starter unless we're going to open up a long laundry list of places, and I can bet we have 67 senators here, we'd have 67 different lists. Let me also suggest, and it's already been noted, that deleting funding is in effect a ban on abortion for people who cannot afford it. Let's take us back to the days before abortion was legal, because that would be the effect of a ban, as some senators have already noted. If you go back to those days, people who couldn't access abortions, the ones who could afford it, could get it. They could get a safe medical procedure. They could go to a different state where it was offered. They could go to private providers that were making it available despite the law. They could fly to a different country to get a safe medical procedure and not put their own lives at risk. But for the ones who could not afford it, they resorted to back alley abortions. They resorted to clothes hangers. They resorted to having people punch them in the stomach to try to abort the baby that they were carrying. There were a lot of women who died or were needlessly permanently maimed because they could not get a safe, affordable abortion. As soon as you defund this that's in front of us right now, a safe medical procedure in an institution that is sanitary, where the medical providers are trained and licensed and accredited, you immediately raise the health risk, perhaps the permanent disfigurement, the permanent inability for a woman later in life or at a different time of her choice to have a child. You may cause all sorts of other health problems, and yes, she may end up dying. We don't want to go there, members. We don't want to go there. I don't think that's appropriate. This is, in effect, a health care decision. And if we're going to start picking and choosing which medical procedures are available to the poor, or are not available to the poor, but are available to others in our health care system, we again start down a long road that leads to nowhere but chaos and inequity. I urge you to oppose this bill.